Welcome everybody to today's panel discussion, Lives Worth Living. My name's Michael Dubinsky. I'm President of Jewish Care Victoria. I was previously responsible for disability services in the state of Victoria, and I'm also the father of Josh, who has an intellectual disability. Now, he couldn't be here today though because he's planning a road trip to go to the soccer in South Australia. So, probably we'd all agree he's probably got his priorities right, really. But I'm sure he would have enjoyed the discussion and probably would have had a word or two to say. I wanted to welcome our panellists, Shirley Glantz, Tamara Henshaw, Dov Deegan, Telly and Uri Rosenberg. Welcome, and you'll hear more about them shortly. Firstly, I just wanted to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land where we meet, the Bunwarang people of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respects to elders past and present. Now, our panel discussion occurs in the context of the exhibition currently showing at the Holocaust Centre called Registered, Persecuted, Annihilated, the Sick and Disabled under National Socialists. So hopefully you've had an opportunity to visit the exhibition. If not, it's here for a number of months, I think. 1 month. Well, 1 month is plenty of time, and I think there'll be time afterwards too if people want to have a little bit of an explore, but it's certainly worth visiting. Between 1933 and 1945, more than 400,000 people living with psychiatric illness, intellectual and physical disabilities were murdered or forcibly sterilised. 200 were murdered, 400 forcibly sterilised in Germany and occupied territories. Deemed to be unworthy of life, people with disabilities were killed with the approval and cooperation of bureaucrats, doctors, nurses, lawyers, health officials, administrators, and in some cases their own families. In a few minutes, Associate Professor Michael Robertson from the University of Sydney School of Medicine will say a few words about the exhibition and the importance of today's discussion. Now, across history, people who have a disability have been stigmatised by questions of their value in society, and there are many examples of persecution, murder, seeking to hide people with disabilities from the mainstream of society and treating them as second-class citizens. When I first commenced working in the human service field, the social service field, Victoria operated large institutions where people with mental illness and intellectual disability were housed away from public life. It was only in 2008, which is 10 years ago, that the largest of these institutions, Kew Cottages, or at the time it had a different name, but Kew Cottages, widely known, with nearly 700 beds, was closed. Now, it was gradually closed, but only 10 years ago was it finally closed. And I was at the end responsible for the closure, and during the final days watched as the residents moved into community residences. And in the years after closure, many have seen remarkable changes in their lives. Improved health outcomes, new employment opportunities, significantly greater independence and greater access to our community. And in the last few years, we've seen the rollout of the National Disability Insurance Scheme, the NDIS, a social reform that will also make and does make a significant difference to people living with a disability. So while our society, our communities come a long way, there is still much to be done and many areas for improvement. We've assembled a really good panel today for today's discussion. They're active members of their community, make significant contributions through their work, volunteerism, activism. They embody the title of this session and the activism outcry, Lives Worth Living. Today we'll be discussing with our panellists what it's like living with a disability, what it's like to be Jewish and living with a disability, how the NDIS has made a difference, and how does our community still need to change. And I'm hoping you'll also ask some questions and not just leave it to me as we move forward. Now, a few words about the format of the session. After Michael Robertson's introduction, I will introduce the panellists, ask them a series of questions, and then I'll open the session to you if you've got any questions. And at the very end, we're really lucky to have some representatives here from some of the key organisations working in the area of disability in our community, in the Jewish community, and they're just going to say a very few words. That's the briefing they've been given, a very few words. So you just have some further information about what are some of the really wonderful things that the community offers. And I certainly look forward to the discussion this afternoon. Now, Professor Michael Robertson is a clinical associate professor of mental health ethics at Sydney Health Ethics and a visiting professorial fellow at the Sydney Jewish Museum. And Michael, I think, has been very instrumental in bringing this exhibition to Australia and certainly bringing it to Melbourne, because it's been in Sydney for a number of months. I'd really like to welcome Michael to say some words to give us some context to the discussion today. So thanks, Michael.
Thank you very much, Michael, and thank you all for your interest and involvement this afternoon. And I particularly wanted to congratulate Jane and her team on not only bringing the exhibition down here, but the program of events that have been pulled together around it. It's really a remarkable achievement, and I'm very, very pleased, as is Dr. Edwina Light, my colleague from Sydney Health Ethics who've come down today, to see such a strong focus on disability rights on this occasion of the exhibition's visit to Melbourne. I don't want to spend too much time taking away from the panel. Just to dwell on a couple of things. First thing, the title of the exercise today, Life's Worth Living, is a direct inversion of the Nazi propagandic trope, life unworthy of life, which was used as the justification for the exclusion, persecution and attempted annihilation of people with disabilities. And so this is an act of defiance. And I think with next week's screening of the film Defiant Lives, I'd like to think that one of the main themes of today is this act of defiance, that I have a life, my life is worth living, I have the same rights and entitlements as other people, and I'm not defined by what I can't do or what I've been diagnosed with, but I am who I am. And I think it's important that we reflect in the defiance of the title of today's activity. The second point, and I don't want to school you on the history of the Krankenmorde, which is the term we now use to describe the crimes perpetrated by the Nazi regime against people with illnesses and disabilities. To say euthanasia is to indulge the language of the perpetrator. But I'm mindful of the fact that last month we were all horrified by events in Squirrel Hill in Pittsburgh, with the mass killing of Jewish people at prayer. But around the same time, the New South Wales Ombudsman released a report into the deaths of 203 people with disabilities who died at the hands of their carers. Now, that event doesn't by no means diminish the significance of Pittsburgh and the reminder of the ever-present risk of anti-Semitism and racism generally, but it speaks to a dynamic that is continuing, that is to say, the invisibility of disability rights as a part of our social discourse. And I am aware that somebody once said to me that the worst form of disadvantage is invisibility. So events like today are all the more important for that. And so with that, I again express my gratitude to Jane and her team for making this happen, to Michael and the panel for today. And with that, over to you.
Thanks, Michael. I'll start by introducing the panel very briefly, and maybe just see if I do it in order. No, I won't. I'm just going to pick you out randomly. So, Tamara Henshaw. That's Tamara. Hi, Tamara. Tamara's disability is hidden. She has an acquired brain injury. As a child, Tamara had difficulties at school and was not functioning and reaching the same milestones as quickly as her peers. It was only at the age of 18, while having a standard scan on her sinuses, that a cyst was discovered pushing on her optic nerve. If left untouched, the cyst would have eventually caused her to go blind. Though the procedure she had then did prevent her from going blind, Tamara was left with an acquired brain injury from the cyst itself. The cyst has caused Tamara many challenges in learning and retaining new information. As Tamara reached her 30s and being keen on living a more independent life, she moved into Mandas Villas, a Jewish care facility where she continues to reside. That's Tamara. Hi Tamara, welcome. Dov Deegan, the end here. Dov is a medical doctor working in a major metropolitan hospital in Melbourne. He has lived experience with mental illness as both an inpatient and as a medical practitioner. He's keen to share his unique perspectives from both sides of the fence and is passionate about destigmatising the taboo of mental illness amongst healthcare professionals and the wider society. He volunteers for Sane Australia and Beyond Blue, which are national organisations working to raise awareness about mental illness and reduce the stress associated, the associated stigma, while encouraging people to seek help. Dov feels that mental health concerns should be addressed and treated just like any other physical illness, and through sharing his story openly, he hopes to effect a positive cultural change. So welcome, Dov. Shirley Glantz. Shirley contracted polio at the age of just 14 months. She spent several months at the Royal Children's Hospital and attended Uralla School before joining mainstream schooling from the age of 7. When her family moved to the eastern suburbs from Carlton, she went into mainstream schooling when her family moved. She now suffers from post-polio syndrome, late effects of polio. Her involvement within the polio community is extensive. Shirley is a very strong advocate for people with disability. Shirley was, and is, I think, actively involved with the National Council of Jewish Women of Australia, now for over 30 years, holding various positions on the board: Vice President, Co-Chair of Israel Project, and Co-Founder of Kulanu. President of the National Council of Jewish Women Victoria from 2014 to 2016. And currently Shirley is Co-Vice President of the National Council. In 2018, in the Queen's Birthday Honours list, Shirley was awarded an OAM, an Order of Australia, for services to the National Council of Jewish Women and the polio community. So Shirley, welcome to the panel. Telly at the end, has a Bachelor in Arts and a Social Work degree and works in marketing and communication at the Victorian Advocacy League for Individuals with Disability. Many people would know the organisation as VALID. She has a chronic illness called familial dysautonomia, only affecting Ashkenazi Jews. She is currently writing a book which focuses on the lived experience of chronic illness and disability. And I think you can find more about Telly which is tellyzigia.wordpress.com. No? Ask Telly afterwards. And finally, Uri Rosenberg. Uri is a tenant at the Mandas Villas. He's a volunteer at the St Kilda Shul and at Alfred Health, and a frequent visitor to Windy Hill, being a keen Bombers supporter. That's actually why we got him on the panel, because for my sins I'm also a keen, as I believe is Shirley. So it's a more distinguished panel than I even realised. Uri worked for 38 years at a factory for people with disabilities. The factory was in Footscray, and Uri helped in the canteen, a job he really enjoyed. Since retiring, Uri has taken up volunteering and has been volunteering for over 8 years at 3 different places: at Mandas Villas, where he puts out the bins, checks the mail, helps get the hub ready for parties and events, and also helps distribute food for our village kitchen. Uri also volunteers doing administrative work at Alfred Health and at St Kilda Shul with Rabbi Ronnie Figdor. So, welcome, Uri. Thanks for coming. So, I'm going to throw over to the panel. You've heard enough from me. My first question, and we might go to everybody with this one. Can you please tell the audience about yourself, a little bit more about yourself? I've given you a bit of an introduction, and your lived experience as a person living with a disability. So who wants to kick it off? Telly?
So I am
Mike? I think we'll just go straight up, actually. It's going to be a lot easier, isn't it?
So I'm Telly Zigger, 38 years old, as of last week. I have a chronic illness that affects Ashkenazi Jews. It's a degenerative condition that's carried in the recessive gene. So I was born with a chronic illness, but I wasn't born with a disability. My disability came later on in life, around 11 years ago, when my condition worsened over time. And that stage is when I started using a walking frame. I am a social worker, and I worked at Urella for 6 years in advocacy, and that was my first experience with people with disabilities, and it was quite confronting for me because I'd never really been around people with disabilities before. It was quite a learning curve, and made me feel, it helped me find myself finally, kind of found my people in a way. And so I've been working in the sector for nearly 10 years, and I love it.
Thank
you. My name's Shirley. Michael alluded to pretty much the background, but as a child growing up, I never really acknowledged that I had a disability. People would ask me, because I never walked with crutches, or I don't walk with a frame. I'm on crutches now, but I used to call it the Boer War injury. Why are you limping? Oh, it's a Boer War injury, because I never really identified that I had a disability, and it was just in the too hard basket. As I've become older and mature, and challenges have been put in front of me, I've had to accept that I have got a disability. I've actually known that, but never really acknowledged it. And so I just, every time I have challenges, I just face them and adjust my life accordingly, unfortunately. And so now I'm at the stage where I'm walking with crutches. I need help to do shopping and cleaning, and thankfully I can drive, but it's a challenge. Life is full of challenges for all of us, but when you have a disability, you have to think about every step that you take. The stairs to get up here, they had to organise a ramp, parking. You have to forward think, and this takes a drain on you, and it's really, really hard. Mentally and physically. So you have to think a step ahead about what you're going to be doing. So, but yet, having said that, do a lot of voluntary work. It's not stopped me from doing what I do, and that keeps me busy, and I actually don't dwell on my disability. I live with it, and that's life. So I move forward.
Hi, my name's Tamara Henshaw. I was born with my disability, and it wasn't really found until I was 18. I went for a regular sinus scan, and I must have moved in the machine, because it flicked from my sinuses to a picture of my brain, and they discovered that I had cysts on the brain. My experience was my milestones were not reached as quickly as my twin sister, and I was treated very differently by other people, and yeah, as I say, my disability is hidden, so nobody can really see it. And then when I make a mistake, people don't understand why I make mistakes, what's wrong with me. So, yeah.
Thanks. Uri.
With my disability, as far as I know, there's only about 25 in Australia that have got my disability. That was at the last count. But with my disability, I don't stop myself for doing things what I want to do, and I try anything I can with my disability. If I can't do it, well, that's fair enough. If I can do it, I'll go on with it. So that's the way it is. Thank you.
Very endearing. My name's Dov. A lot of the biography was sort of covered. I'm the youngest of two. Shout out to my parents and my auntie in the audience as well. You can see where I came from. I usually use the disclosure of mental health till last because I feel that the label, while I've accepted it, doesn't define who I am. So, starting with the biographical stuff, I was, born and raised in Melbourne. I went to Mount Scopus. I really wanted to be a doctor, so I went to Monash Uni and graduated in 2008. And then I went on to subspecialise, which I've been doing for the last few years, which has been quite exhausting, in both general medicine and nephrology, which is renal medicine or kidneys. And finally finished that in July this year. So can finally call myself a specialist 10 years later, but we got there. I live with bipolar disorder. I was diagnosed about 18 years ago now. And it's affected me in a lot of ways, which is too much to describe in a short period, as these guys would probably allude to as well. But I was hospitalised during medical school, which was a major setback. I had 4 weeks left of second year and I had to repeat the whole year just to get to those 4 weeks. But despite that, I still finished medical school. I got honours, got through my specialties of choice. And I have had setbacks along the way, but it hasn't stopped me from achieving my goal. And I think there's a unifying thread that I'm hearing along the panel that you can be high functioning despite disability or mental illness. And that's actually one of the reasons I started advocating, because I think there's too much stigma and too much misperception out there in the community about disability and also mental illness. And I think that just because we have labels, they don't define who we are. We're still people at the core, and it's really about separating the illness from the person that's underneath.
Can I just follow up with you? You've got the mic, rather than send it up and down. But as somebody who works in the health system, have you faced specific challenges from your colleagues in particular and the way the system operates?
So there's two sides to the coin, as was sort of in the biography. Because I've got a lived experience as both a patient and as a medical practitioner, I can see both sides of the fence. So when I speak from the doctor's perspective, I often see a lot of disparaging remarks from my colleagues about patients with psychiatric problems, which I don't see when they refer to people that are unaffected. And there are biases that are there that the public wouldn't be aware of. Like, I will often see, say, someone who's admitted with psychiatric problems, their medications are omitted off the drug chart, but we would never forget to chart someone's insulin, say, for diabetes. So there is a subtle discrimination there. And I think part of it is due to ignorance. We don't get as much education about mental health when we go through medical school. So when I did medicine, I think my term in mental health was maybe 8 or 9 weeks in the whole 5 years. Yeah. And when you consider the prevalence of mental illness and how it affects people. So there is definitely a medical side to things. I think language is really important when it comes to medical health. So a lot of my colleagues, and I've heard it in the community, people might say I'm a little bit OCD, which is used colloquially, but it's actually quite damaging to someone that suffers from obsessive compulsive disorder, which is very debilitating. And there's also a hierarchy of stigma, I think, in medicine with mental health. So we're very lucky that a lot of the conditions have been destigmatised, particularly anxiety and depression, but lower prevalence mental illnesses like schizophrenia, obsessive compulsive disorder, bipolar disorder, they're not well understood, they're not well talked about, and so I think consequently they're not well understood both by the public but also medical practitioners. And just briefly from the patient perspective, I've also been at the receiving end of that disparaging remarks when I was hospitalised, both from nurses and doctors and unfortunately some psychiatrists. So I've had some good experiences and some not so good experiences, and I've found that my employers have not necessarily known how to approach the topic. They dance around it, they call it the illness, but I haven't had many that are forthcoming with speaking about it with me and helping with my return to work. And so that's another motivating factor for why I speak so publicly, because I know that they're afraid. So if I throw the first stone and speak first, then I can teach them how to support me and hopefully influence the culture that way.
Great. Are there any other challenges that you've faced that you want to refer to?
I guess there's always stigma, which I think everyone here has probably experienced. When I tell people I have bipolar disorder, the first reaction to open disclosure is they're quite surprised because I'm quite high functioning and they didn't realise that you can live a successful life and have a history of mental illness. So I think facing stigma head on is a big part of that. And it's basically people's misconceptions. I think ignorance breeds fear, and people don't know what to say because they don't really understand the topic. So they're sort of afraid to approach it. And I only openly disclosed my illness 3 years ago. So I can very much relate to this invisibility that people are talking about. You can live with depression and anxiety and no one knows except for you. So I think open disclosure invites people to have that conversation, and then allowing yourself to be vulnerable maybe helps other people to remove their own stigma and have a real humane conversation with you about it.
Uri, is there anything do you want to say or add to the challenges that you've faced, in your long life?
Well, at the moment, I just like to stay healthy and fit and look after myself.
Yeah.
That's the challenge for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks.
Is that all?
Yeah. Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
My memory is my biggest challenge. My long-term memory is fantastic, but my short-term memory is very poor. I can remember things that happened many, 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 many years ago, but you can ask me what your name is in 10 minutes' time and I'll go, I don't know. So my way of handling my memory is to make notes.
Yeah.
If I don't make a shopping list, I will go with my carer and we'll go, hey, I need to go to Coles, but I've had the experience once where I left my shopping list on the fridge and they went, oh, what are we doing? And I went, I don't have my piece of paper, so we have to go back home. So, things that certain people take for granted, you can go to the supermarket and go, oh, well, I know what I need. But if I don't write physically what I need, I'll go to the supermarket and not know what I'm here for. So my way of coping with it is by making notes. I used to carry a huge file of facts with me, but now, thanks to technology and stuff, I put everything into my mobile phone, and my mobile phone has become my BFF. Yeah.
That's great.
And and it's my lifeline also to keep in contact with the family, and but it's my BFF for notes and stuff, so
Great,
that's
thanks.
the way I do it.
Okay. Shirley, so again, the question is, the biggest challenges you face and how you deal with them.
The biggest challenges for me, and this is about my story. So, as a polio survivor, if people see me, they say, "Oh, so what have you had done? Your hip, your knee, or your back?" And I say, "Polio." It raises a lot of questions with people. I didn't think you could still get it. Is it still, is it the virus is still here? I didn't think anyone was still alive having it. And how come, what's your story? So it's starting conversation. The challenges that I find is that when I have a medical problem, that the doctors, if I go for surgery, the doctors don't know anything about how to treat people who have had polio, because anaesthesia is one of the biggest risks for people with polio. I had surgery recently. I had to give them I gave them a page. I mean, there's 10 pages I could have given them, but when I gave the registrar the information before I went into hospital, they were appreciative because they didn't know the risks. They don't have the time. The doctors don't have the time to look and to read, to understand what happens to people, because we have unfortunately lost a few people from incorrect anaesthesia, because a lot of polio people have breathing problems. I'm not one of those, but I still am at a high risk. So it's just being aware of your disability, or what, like Dov's, did I call you the right name?
Yeah.
we have a little thing going. Dov or Josh used to volunteer for me when I was at JNF, and I always got his name wrong. So anyway, so I just find I'm constantly advocating for myself and for people that have a disability, and of course particularly for people with polio. So the organisation that I belong to is an advocacy group, and that's what we do, is we're trying to communicate with hospitals to let them know how to treat people like us. We all have, everyone has different, I mean, you could have 5 polio people sitting here and they all have different issues that need to be addressed. Mine is my leg, some have respiratory, some have spinal. It's just all such a we're complex people, and we need to be treated as individuals, as we all do here, as individuals when it comes to medical. And they're the challenges I face, and that's what I'm advocating for, is to raise awareness that we are still here. There are 400,000 polio survivors in Australia. Some of them don't even know they had it. They go to the doctor and they say, "Oh, I'm tired, I'm weak, my leg." And then the question sometimes, if the doctor thinks about it, might ask, "Well, did you have polio as a child?" "Oh, I don't know, I'm not sure." And then they go back into the history, and yes, they did have. So these are the things that sometimes affect people and they don't even know. So, yeah, there's challenges.
Telly?
Well, the obvious challenge for me is around accessibility, accessing venues, getting into cafes, getting into work, getting onto public transport, going out shopping. These things I have to navigate on a daily basis, and I find it quite difficult. And in fact, have to get my mother to do a lot of things for me because access is an issue for me. So she has to go do the shopping. So that's the main issue for me. But one challenge I find is keeping up with my peers. I went to a mainstream private Jewish school. The teachers are great education, but I wasn't able to keep up with my peers. They were able to do sports, work hard, stay up late, studying, and I could not keep up with the pace. And because of that, I always felt like I could never achieve what I wanted to achieve. I could never be successful, and it's exhausting trying to keep up with able-bodied people, both mentally and physically, as I said before.
I'll follow on, so the next question was really, and some of you, by virtue of your age, will have a better way of looking at what's changed over time. But in my introduction, I talked a bit about some of the changes that have occurred in our community. We don't have large institutions. There's certainly been changes to laws around new buildings and accessibility, but there's a huge legacy we still have to deal with, and there's the NDIS, of course. So have you seen, are there changes that you've seen that have made a difference to your life? Are there, in your experience? And what would they be?
So I never received funding.
Yeah.
I applied for the ISP, but I was on the waiting list for 6 years.
ISP is an individual support package as part of the state government system.
This is
Huge
free.
waiting lists, over 3,000 people.
Sorry?
There were over 3,000 people,
Yeah.
I think, on the waiting list, and you were clearly one of those 3,000, yeah.
So for 6 years, for more, 36, whatever years, I had to fund my disability personally, with financially. And that was it's not a struggle, we managed, but, you know, normal day-to-day life is expensive as it is, and putting a disability on top of that is a struggle as well. So having the NDIS has made a real difference to me personally. I didn't have to wait. They accepted me straight away, and as soon as that happened, it's an amazing feeling to not have to worry so much anymore, to know that I can get the support that I need financially, which I never did before. I never had personal support before. Having personal support, a support worker, has made a huge difference to me, in that I don't have to waste my energy cooking and cleaning. Someone can do it for me.
Yeah.
And just little things like that make a huge difference to my life. So when I found out that I was on the list, that I was getting the NDIS, it was a very emotional time for me. It was
It's fantastic.
life-changing.
Yeah. I know, Shirley, you've got an experience with the NDIS. So the question was a bit broader than the NDIS, but in your life, that's clearly will be the biggest reform that's had an impact on you. Shirley?
Well, I've actually just scraped in to get onto the onto the NDIS.
I mean, you're still very young, because there is an age limit of 65, and poor old Uri.
This is the issue. I got in on the cusp. I turned 65, and if you apply 6 months before you turn 65, there is a chance that you can get in onto the NDIS. Because I'm in the community, I found that out, and I was lucky enough to apply for it. How did I feel about all of that? I thought, if I get it, okay. If I don't, well, I've lived my life so this far. But now that I'm into it, I'm only 2 weeks into it, I must tell you. So I'm so I'm a newbie.
A new graduate.
Yes. So it's actually, I feel actually quite happy about the whole idea, in that someone can help me with my shopping, because it's a struggle. So imagine this scenario. You're on crutches, you have to put one crutch in the trolley, and then you're holding the other crutch onto the trolley, and you're walking around, right? Try doing that at Bay Street Supermarket on a regular basis, right? Then you have to schlep it out. Then you have to take it to the car and then put it in the car. And luckily, my husband is at home to take it out at the other end. He could come with me, but I like my independence. I'm a lady. I like to shop. I don't want to do online. All my friends say do online. It's great. Yeah, but, it's an activity. And it's something that I like doing. Women like to shop, even if it is for food. So having said that, so I will have someone who will take me shopping. I will have someone who will do the help me in the house. I will have someone who can take me to appointments. And the good thing is that I'll have physiotherapy. Now that will make my life a lot easier. And all of this the whole idea of the plan is to have that person living at home at the best of their ability.
Yeah.
Right? I don't want to go into an aged care, right? But the problem, this is my bad point, is that for polios, if you're over 65 and you have a disability, you don't get it. It doesn't apply. You have to go on an aged care package, and if you go on an aged care package, you won't get disability. You won't get braces. Yeah. You won't get equipment. You won't get that. And you know how much one person gets a year? $2,400 for a piece of equipment. Telly, does that going to work? No. So That's my complaint. I wasn't going to bring it up, but now
But
you've asked.
you're
But
among
it's true.
friends.
If you're over 65 and you have a disability, what happens?
Yeah.
I mean, I know there are people here who are involved in NDIS, so it's another story.
Yeah.
That's another topic.
Yeah.
Anyway, so the changes have been really good. And I think that over the years, like I went to Uralla as a child, and in those years it was called the
Spastic Society.
My parents pulled me out of there in their wisdom. At the time, I didn't really need to be in that sort of environment, and they put me into mainstream, and that's where I succeeded and flourished. And it was thanks to their foresight that they pulled me out. Having said that, there are people, unfortunately, that have to be in special places and need that special care, but that wasn't for me. And
Yeah. Now, I know you're also someone who you use the NDIS as well, don't you, Tamara?
Yes, but yes.
But go on, you
So-
want to talk about the other question first.
Which one?
Oh, no, I'm just going to leave it to you. Go on. So the question was really, have you the changes that you've seen?
Okay.
Yeah.
So the NDIS is new for me. I've only just started with it, but I'm sure it will give me a new outlook on my life. My disability you can't really see, and I have an acquired brain injury that I struggle with day-to-day things, just like remembering the smallest things, and that's why things that seem a lot like easy to some people are not that easy,
Yeah.
because my memory is a mess, and it was by no fault of my own. So yeah, I'm sure as the NDIS becomes more familiar, I'll become more aware of what it's all about.
Yeah. Yeah, okay.
So what supports have you been given under the NDIS?
Just more time with carers. So I have a
So the
carer.
question was, what supports has Tamara been given?
So I have a carer that comes shopping with me, because I'm also epileptic, so I can't drive. So my carer comes shopping with me. I have a carer that helps me with housekeeping, just to keep my room in some kind of order. Sometimes doesn't happen. It doesn't stay from week to week. So just the bit of support, going shopping, changing my linen, just housekeeping.
Did you receive any for doing any programs or?
No, not that I know of, no.
What about before the NDIS? Did you get access to those sorts of supports before the NDIS?
Yeah, but it was all like, it was funded by my parents.
Okay,
So,
yeah. So there was nothing from the government that you
no,
received before
no.
that? Yeah. You may well have been on the same waiting list that Telly was on.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, I
So-
suspect, yeah. I'm just going to ask the panel, and anyone can throw into this one. Have you experienced any sort of blatant discrimination that you want to discuss in terms of the disability that you have? Any experiences that you want to touch on? Or can touch on? Telly?
I don't know if it's blatant, but
Doesn't need to be blatant.
I go out. I like to go out to cafes, to the movies with friends, family, and often, people will see me with the walker and with this able-bodied person beside me, and instead of talking to me at the cafe, they will talk to my friend who's able-bodied,
Yeah.
and assume that I'm unable to make a decision or speak for myself.
Yeah. I think that's pretty common. I think others I saw Tamara was,
It
Shirley.
not only happens in that scenario, you are part of the hospital being interviewed by multidisciplinary, and they refer to, they don't even look at you when they talk to you, they interview you. They're talking about you, I mean, about me. Why won't they ask me the question? It's like as if you don't exist. So that's part of the advocacy that we're trying to change in hospitals situations, that the doctors actually, and in the multidisciplinary scenario, that they actually talk to you as if you're a human being. I mean, if you're talking about, does she need a caliper, doesn't she need a caliper, does she need crutches, it's as if you're not there. And it's really quite disconcerting. I mean, on a funny side, I actually use my disability to my advantage, right? There are things out there that you can do that help you, If you want to go to the ballet, I mean, it's all about the no, right? You go to the ballet, you can ring up the concierge, they'll have a wheelchair there, and they'll take you back of house, they'll take you to the steps to where you have to go. But this is all forward planning, and that's what Telly and I were talking about, and the other. You have to think about what you have to do, and that's so debilitating. It's time-consuming, but it means that we can actually go to places, and I stopped going to places because I don't have access, and I'm sure Telly feels the same way. Yeah. That's our biggest challenge.
Anyone else? Goff?
You've got your own.
Still my line.
It's interesting talking about discrimination, because we often assume that it's going to be something very overt, but I think it's often very silent, but it's the silent things that are more dangerous. So I know for me, one of my major periods of illness was during my advanced training, and I was at a major hospital, and when I came back to work, my supervisor couldn't talk about bipolarism. He couldn't say the words. He just kept saying the illness. It was so uncomfortable. And then our college is supposed to look after us, pay big fees every year to the college, and I'm not 100% sure what the return is. But essentially, after I came back to work, after being in hospital, and I still wasn't okay, I wasn't 100%, I had to then do interviews for the following year. They made no concessions for me. They didn't let me sit the interviews at a later time, and I was not myself. And the placement that I got the following year, which I could never prove, but they sent me to Bendigo, which is 2.5 hours away. So I spent a year in the country following a major psychiatric setback with no support from the college, my medical society or anything. And I don't want to big note myself, but I've always done very well. I've always gotten the placements that I wanted. I wanted to train at the Alfred. I got the Alfred. This was the first time where it was like my 10th placement. And not only that, they were sending someone vulnerable to the country. And in hindsight, it was good for me because through resilience, I developed myself again, got my confidence back, became well again. But no one was tracking me. And they all knew that I'd had this episode because everyone was talking about it. And I remember even when I had the interviews, it was like a speed dating thing. I spent 7 minutes in each network, and then the bell rang and you went to the next one. And 4 of them asked me what was wrong, what happened to you, which they're not allowed to do. So I was put in like very vulnerable, confronting situations, didn't perform my best in the interview, and then the reward was to go to the country for a year. And I can't prove it, but I'm sure that was because of the episode. I think I was considered a liability, and it took a long time for me to rebuild my reputation, to get my confidence back, because no one in medical world is talking about these things. So many people are suffering with mental illness in silence, and the prevalence is actually higher than mainstream society. But no one's talking about it because of this sort of discrimination. And you can generalise it even more. I mean, I don't see that if you take a sick day from work for, mental health, call it a mental health day or whatever, that would be less substantiated than if you took a day off for a migraine. Yeah. So many of my colleagues called in sick with a migraine, And both of them you can't visualise. Both of those things are in the mind. Both of them are arguably organic illnesses that affect you, and yet one is acceptable and one is discriminated against. And no one in my profession says, I need a day off because I'm burnt out, or I've done too many on-calls, or I'm exhausted, and yet they're all feeling it. Instead, they'll say, I've got a migraine. Yeah. So that, for me, is discrimination, because we're not allowed to admit that we're not coping or we're not okay, but yet we'll have Are You OK Day, and we'll have those token, once a year things that the hospitals put on so that it looks like we're doing well for the trainees. And that's the part that gripes me, because it's the hidden discrimination. Okay, it's not overt. They didn't fire me. They didn't kick me off the program. But I had to really work my way back to get to where I wanted to.
They set you up to fail,
yeah.
Whether that was deliberate or not. They certainly didn't acknowledge or understand or respond in an appropriate way.
And the reason that I am so passionate about mental health advocacy is because if doctors can't get support, then I don't know what people in the wider community are facing. Well, I do know what they're facing because I've experienced it, but the services and the difficulties and discrimination would be even more prevalent. So I think the more that we talk about it and the more dialogue we have, then the more chance we can change it.
Yeah. Anyone else want to comment on that question? Well, no. In your case, Marilyn, another Essendon supporter, how could I say no?
That's the only reason I did this.
That's right.
I just wanted to go on for Dom. Dom, I work at Jewish Care, and we get a lot of people who come to us with mental illness, and particularly those with bipolar or schizophrenia. There's a similar theme that some of them speak of, and it comes to mind at a recent conversation I had with someone with schizophrenia who I'd never spoken to before, who disclosed their schizophrenia and said very quickly, but don't worry, I'm not violent. And it took me back, because I thought it hadn't even occurred to me that they'd be violent. And I asked about that, and the person said to me, well, everyone assumes that because I've got schizophrenia or, this sort of not talked about mental illness, that I'm going to be violent. Because any time something goes wrong, they always say the person had schizophrenia or mental illness. I wonder if that's ever been something that you've either experienced or heard about, because I can imagine that would be extraordinarily hard to carry along with you.
Fortunately for me, I haven't experienced that much. Because I'm disclosing now in a position of strength, I find that by being vulnerable, like everyone on the panel here is today, you actually have more strength because you're owning your story and you're not shaming from it, and no one can throw a stone at you because you know who you are, you're acknowledging who you are, and you're admitting to vulnerability. And actually it makes people feel like they too can be vulnerable and can share their problems and things as well. So I haven't had a direct experience of that, but I have seen with patients with certain illnesses, particularly borderline personality disorder, that when they come into hospital, they're immediately discounted by the nurses at triage, the emergency staff. I've worked in intensive care where people roll their eyes when someone's had a suicide attempt. Like, I've seen all sorts of things that it's all hidden from public eye, but it gripes me because I don't know if I'm complicit by being silent. I can't possibly speak up for every time that I see some of these things happen. But even just the subtle things, like I mentioned earlier, like not prescribing someone with schizophrenia their medication, that for me is just discrimination. That medication is not considered important. Like if I went to hospital and they didn't prescribe my medication, I'd be irate. And some of these people are not conscious, or they have, they can't advocate for themselves, and they have their medical practitioner not sort of doing the right thing. So I think there needs to be a lot of education around the fact that physical and mental illnesses are just as valid comorbidities, and if necessary, upskill the education. What is borderline personality disorder? I reckon if you asked most healthcare practitioners, they wouldn't give you the diagnosis. A lot of people don't know what schizophrenia is, even my colleagues. They've still got those assumptions, like, or they think of mental hospital as one flew over the cuckoo's nest kind of thing, because they don't realise that things have evolved. ECT is not this barbaric treatment. It's actually got valid. There's a lot of misconceptions in the public eye about what actually goes on for mental illness. So short answer, I haven't experienced, but I have seen that definitely happened for other people, and then they have to sort of defend their label.
So, Marilyn, I think you've started something. So I've got a few other questions, but we might throw to... I think we need a microphone. Can I just grab one? And I'll... So I better go back to mine. Are there any questions so far from the audience? Vicky, you've already had one. You can have one, but I'll just see if... It's all right, you've got the microphone now. No, go for it. Go for it.
Okay, I'll do some disclosure myself because I'm a parent of a 29-year-old daughter who has an intellectual disability. So I'm taking my access hat off now and putting my parent hat on. I feel like I'm the parent actually of all of you because one thing that's become clear to me is that looking after a child that has a disability is a real privilege as a parent. So I want to inject a very positive note in. But if you had to give a message to parents in the community about having a disability or having a child with a disability, what message would you give them?
Good question. Well, I think it's starting with...
So with my condition, it affects people very differently. I'm very healthy, I'm very lucky, but a lot of people in my condition have respiratory issues and are unable to eat and swallow properly, so they have tubes. And their parents see their child as an invalid. They don't think their child's going to be able to live a life that they want to live. So in 2010, I went to New York on my own with my walker to meet a lot of people with my condition because every year they have an annual event for people with familial dysautonomia. And I met a number of parents who looked at me and couldn't believe that I'd flown on my own to another country. I had 2 degrees, that I had a job, that I drove. They couldn't believe it. I didn't think it was possible. And it really upset me because I could see the people with FD, that they were able to do things. They were able to achieve their goals, but their parents were so scared for them to face challenges. So they held them back. And so I think it's really important for parents. I think it's important for parents to let their children make mistakes, to fail, to fall over. Because eventually they will achieve the goals that they want. It may not be the normal way that an able-bodied, healthy person can do it, but they'll get there.
Yeah. It's a great answer.
I often wondered what my parents, how they coped, and I reflect on how they were new immigrants to Australia post-war, and I grew up in a loving and a home where I never thought. I mean, I had a caliper, and I struggled with all of that, but it was never a problem. My parents were loving and caring, and I don't ever remember them saying to me, "Don't do that, you might hurt yourself." Just picking up on what Telly said, or anything like that. It was just and my brother's sitting here, and he will back me up on that because I don't remember, and that's what I think you have to. I often thought if I ever had a child that was disabled, what would I do different that my parents did to me? You'd give them the love and the encouragement. And yes, you can fall down and you can break a leg, just like everybody else. I think parents today, in normal mainstream parents who have normal children, are too protective of their children and they don't let them spread their wings. And I think maybe a child with a disability, well, for me, I was given those wings to do what I could do, and I have done what I've wanted to do, and luckily I have a husband who tells me go and do whatever you like. So it's just followed on, and I'm pretty strong-willed anyway, but it's come from my parents, and I actually give them credit for who I am and what I've achieved. So just hang in there, you know, be proud of who your children are and take them as they come, because they bring their love and their beauty to you.
Yeah. Tamara.
So I'm one of a twin,
Yeah.
and my twin sister was born 100% normal with no issues. I went to a mainstream school, but later on in my higher grades, I did my subjects on a lower grade, but I still went to a mainstream school.
In South Africa?
In South Africa. And yeah, things were just harder for me, but somehow we managed.
Is there anything that you would say to parents who have a child with a disability? Any advice you'd give them?
Well, I was never treated differently. I think just to treat everybody the same. Yes, I might have been given extra help, but to label someone as disabled, I just think the word disability is a couple of letters too long. It's just able. You're able, just in a different way.
Yeah.
So I don't like, personally, I don't like the word disability, because I'm not disabled. I have issues, but I'm not disabled. And I might have special needs, but I'm not disabled.
My advice for parents would be to look after that child, give it love and the caring it needs. If you're burnt out from doing that, like you're tired or anything, let your neighbour and who you could trust to help you look after that child, to give you a rest. Yeah. And if the neighbour doesn't want to do that, we'll try and find a disability respite where they will and care for your child. Thank you.
Thanks, Sue.
I'm trying to think how to adapt my situation. It's a bit
'Cause,
different. My parents
your
have been
parents are
great. They
here.
get us standing up. I think
So it's time for some home truths. Huh?
I think because mental illness is so poorly understood and not widely discussed, I think it's very difficult for parents to know what to do. I don't think there's a rule book, and I don't think there's like a, you know, I would imagine that instinctively parents want to fix things when their kids are unwell or, you know, have something broken in some way. And when you've got something you can visualise organically, like a broken arm, let's say, you can actually monitor the fracture healing. You can do serial x-rays and you can say, all right, well, they'll be in plaster for 6 weeks. When the mind is broken, there's no such rule book. And there's a lot of experimenting with psychiatry in terms of getting the right balance of therapy and medication or whatever your particular healing strategy is going to be. And I would imagine that for parents that would be very isolating, watching your child behave completely. I know for me, during mania, I was an absolute terror. I was very reckless, doing very dangerous things, spending a lot of money and just worrying the hell out of my family, which would have been very, very difficult for them. So I think it's very important to have support that from other people that have maybe gone through something similar. But the most important thing you can do, which I've done for myself, is educate yourself and arm yourself with the facts. Learn as much as you can about the illness, whether that's through organisations, Beyond Blue, SANE, whether it's through speaking to other families that have gone through something similar, but arming yourself with the knowledge so that you know what is and isn't normal and what the sort of expected recovery course is. And it's also really important to trust and have rapport with the treating team looking after, in my case, me. So making sure that, you know, you've got open access to that doctor as well, so you can ask questions and supervise the process. But I think the most important thing is to be there, is to stick around, because a lot of these I shouldn't call them kids because I'm a kid as well, but a lot of the people in this situation go to drugs, do very reckless things, and the culprit mental health issue is never targeted. And then it's just, oh, my kid's doing drugs and whatever. And it's just very misunderstood. There's a lot of ignorance around mental illness. So I think it's really important we get some support groups, dialogues going so that parents know what signs to look out for. We can arm ourselves with mental health first aid rather than just CPR so that we know what professional burnout looks out, what subtle depression looks like. You know, if this was more widely known, we had 4 psychiatric registrars take their lives at my previous hospital network in a very short space of time, and that wasn't discussed. And they were psychiatry doctors. So it's not that they're not insightful enough, it's not that they didn't know enough about their health, but the support wasn't there. And that's the thing that I think needs to change, and more so for parents who are probably lay people who have never experienced mental illness before, so they don't know what it looks like. I think they need a bit more information.
I mean, it's quite damning, isn't it, that the system that's training psychiatrists itself doesn't appear.
We don't debrief.
Yeah.
So in 10 years of medicine, I have never had someone sit down and go, do you want to debrief about what you just saw? Or we just watched someone die, should we talk about that? Nothing. In 2018, I have never had a debriefing. Nurses do it.
Yeah.
They all have regular debriefs. Doctors don't get it. So there are so many ingredients for why we're not okay, and none of it's addressed, and I think we need to start.
Thanks. Did you want to say something else, Tamara?
Yeah.
And I'm going to... Is there anyone...
Sorry, Dove. When you talk of mental illness, sometimes it's a bit shameful to say. I'm talking from my experience. I also suffer from depression, which was only came on after I have had brain surgery, and sometimes it's a bit like embarrassing to say that I have a mental illness, because as I say, there's stigma. But I guess it is what it is. I'm now. It's been diagnosed, and I take meds for it, and I guess you say, "Are you okay?" It is what it is.
Yeah.
My doctor checks on me regularly. He won't give me a script without physically seeing me, and I mean, living with a mental illness, it's not easy, but it's done.
Many people do it.
Yeah. So, yeah.
We've got a question over here.
Thanks, Michael.
I think
Can you
someone...
hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm Shirley's brother,
Oh.
as she's mentioned before. And I grew up with Shirley in Carlton, and we had a one... I'm not talking as a parent, but the philosophy that our parents had was treat her as normal. You are normal, Eric, she's normal, and that's how we sort of grew up. It was actually highlighted with our neighbours. We lived in a multicultural society. We had Greeks, Italians, some Jews, and they all accepted Shirley for what she is. They didn't talk about disabilities or anything like that. So we had a terrific upbringing, and I'm so proud of you. And Esther and I... No, I just want to highlight that the topic that is on today and all the panellists were fantastic, and life's worth living.
Yeah.
Sure.
I'm going to... I might ask Anna Dubinsky. She's some relative of mine. She's just here.
Something that I've noticed in the disability activist circles over the past few years is that people with disabilities are starting to challenge their discrimination they've experienced by emphasising the really positive aspects of their lives and the positive things that have come from them experiencing disability. And so I was wondering if you could talk about the enriching and positive aspects and I guess perspectives on life that have stemmed from having that experience of disability.
You're directing it to anyone? Everyone? A couple of people, yeah.
the positive, like the opportunity that came for me as a person living with a disability was I now do disability education, working for the Glenara City Council. So I go to schools and do disability awareness talks to school kids going into high school, so just before they go into high school, and educating them through doing disability awareness, explaining my story, and, you know, telling them not to judge, you know, to be accepting, and it gives me a buzz. I can't express it in other ways. It just gives me a zing that I'm buzzing for days afterwards.
Yeah, that's great.
And it's not because I love talking about myself, but just that sharing, it gives me a buzz. I can't explain it in a different word. It's a zing.
What kind of responses do you get from the people that you talk to?
Oh, they afterwards we go around and we say, are there any questions that come around? And when they ask questions, it really makes me happy, because it makes me think that they actually listened. They didn't just zone out and go, oh, well, it's just another talk, so, you know. So as I say to my mum, whenever I do a school talk, I get a zing, I get a buzz. So, yeah.
Can I just add to that?
Yeah.
Sorry, just quickly. I did a teacher's a training thing as well, and I used to go around to primary schools and talk about polio to children. And in those days, I used to get on the floor and talk to them, and they'd help me show the video, you know, like there was a whole presentation. And some of the questions were really good. Like Tamara said, you know, they're actually listening. And because polio is basically eradicated in Western world, it is still in Papua New Guinea. I just want you to know, it's not far away. So it's still a flight away, is what we say in our community. I run a support group in the Bayside area for polio survivors. So that's what's encouraged me to help others, and being with like-minded people. We don't always sit and talk about our disability. It's just about being together so that you walk in and you don't say, I don't feel well, I'm tired, blah, 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 you know, all of that. And then on the advocacy side, we lobby at the government, at the state level, to inform doctors about what's going on with polio. We're out at the hospital, we're out at doctor's surgery. So that's what I've gained from my disability, and pushing the boundaries and raising awareness is what I want to do. I mean, it's still there. There are still immigrants coming in from countries and there is a younger sect we're trying to reach out to them who have polio. So how are they going to deal with it in 20 years' time? So we're trying to mentor them into understanding what their life could be like. They don't want to know about it, but we have to just be patient. And that was a bit negative, I must say.
It's all right. I'm just going to quickly now introduce... I've got one last question for everybody on the panel, but I wanted to introduce 4 people who are here who work in Jewish communal organisations who are doing great work to support people who live with the disability and also their families. So over at the back there, and you've got 1 minute or so. So Vicky, did you hear that? 1 minute.
It's an elevator.
Dean Cohen from Flying Fox. Just introduce and just briefly about the organisation.
Awesome.
Yeah.
My name's Dean. I run an organisation called Flying Fox. Many of you might know it as Camp Sababa. We basically run camps for young people with a disability, mostly cognitive disabilities, and we just do the fun stuff. We're not interested in OT or speech or anything else. Kids come on camp and they have a great time, and that's our game. The biggest achievement of Flying Fox, and I think the biggest impact that we'll have on our community into the future, is that to date we've trained up 400 young people from our community to work in disability. a bunch of them, including Lara, who's about to represent Jewish Care, was one of our first volunteers. A couple work at Access now that Vicky's going to speak about. A couple have supported Shari with Maccabi Carnival, supporting people with a disability to go on sporting programs. So I think that Flying Fox has been able to be this entry point into disability for young people in our community. And today we had 60 people at Blake Street Shul being trained up for a camp coming up in 2 weeks. So it's a pretty positive outlook for the future of our community with young people coming through.
Thanks, Ben.
It's a great question. So we ran a company called The Best Bunch, which was a social enterprise where we provided an employment opportunity to people with a disability, and the plan was that we'd make some money for the organisation. To be honest, it worked, and that was the problem, that we couldn't find someone to champion it and to run the project, and we like running camps.
I think Dean spent more time delivering flowers than he did,
And Mike was on our advisory board when we started the whole thing, so it's a whole family project.
Shari?
Apparently I'm next. So I'm Shari. I'm from Maccabi. I look after our All Abilities program. We are in a unique position in that we're attached to a mainstream organisation. We're not just a disability service provider. So we do have our All Abilities programs, which are regular training and social activities specifically for individuals with disabilities, and a lot of them we do in conjunction with Access Jewish Care. We borrow a few volunteers from Flying Fox. We all work nicely together. But we also have 20-something other mainstream clubs that we connect with, so we try and look for opportunities to get individuals involved in sport and recreation in whatever way is right for them. So we have some individuals who assistant coach, who volunteer with mainstream clubs, who train with mainstream clubs, who help out with carnivals, who get involved in all sorts of different capacities and aspects of sport and recreation.
Great, thank you. Is it Lara?
Yeah, so I'm not Steve. I'm Lara.
Oh, it says Steve up there. Yeah.
I'm actually really new to Jewish Care. I've only been working there for about 5 months, but we do a lot of really cool things. We have 4 houses where 3 to 4 residents live in each house. They have in-home carers that do different shift works, and they come in and help them live independently. And then we have Amanda's Villas, where Yuri and Tamara live, and they live independently. We have a few guys that live there that do need carers to come in and help them get out of bed and to cook, and I don't know what else they do, but they help out. And then we have in-home support, so people come in, help people in their houses, and then I work in the Disability Respite Centre. We have 2 houses inside our Disability Centre. We have 5 rooms in each house. One's for adults and one's for kids. We've got a kosher kitchen, and we've got sensory rooms and playgrounds and trampolines, and it's heaps of fun. And then I run the group activities. So every Sunday for the kids, and during the school holidays, we run group activities every single day, and we go to the zoo and Phillip Island and a whole bunch of really fun things. So yeah, that's what we do.
Thank you. And Vicky.
I wanted to speak last so I'd have more time.
Yeah.
Okay. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Vicky Factor. I'm the president of Access Inc. So Access is a little unique in the Jewish community because I think we're the only organisation that runs services pretty well across the whole week. Now, we do that in 3 main areas: life learning, hospitality. Too close? Can you still hear me if it's this far away? Okay. Life learning, hospitality and health and fitness. We also run an art studio and a drumming program, and we have 2 social enterprises, Access Bakery and Access Espresso. So our participants in the bakery bake goods, and we sell them to various shops within the community. And at Access Espresso, we have a coffee cart, we sell coffee, and we have a barista training program as well. So it's a very dynamic and busy organisation. Our programs are pretty well for age 16 and over at the moment, though we are looking to see if we can also capture a younger group, because there's clearly need below the age of 16 as well, outside of the school hours. We're a very, as I said, very dynamic organisation, and we operate with a lot of volunteers, and of course we have staff and a CEO as well. So I think that pretty well covers it, except I just want to... I want to invite all of you to come and see firsthand what we do, and if anyone is interested in some volunteering opportunities as well, that would be appreciated, because we need the volunteers. Okay, and just on a final note, a sad note, but I just want to dedicate my part today to a young man who passed away this week, who was a member of the Access family, Josh Fehrenbach. He was 32, and I have to tell you, his was a life very much worth living, as is every one of this panel member and everyone here today. And I think that the big message that I want to take away or give to you actually is that there is a lot of disability in the Jewish community, and we need to take more notice, we need to have more understanding, and I hope that everyone today will take away these messages and in turn speak to other members of the community. Last point is to thank Mike Dubinsky and Jewish Care for putting on today. Thank you.
We really thought it was important as part of this session just to showcase, even if very briefly, the great opportunities that this community creates, and it is a unique community in the services, the opportunities, the volunteerism, and the commitment that people have. So, thanks everybody. It's really lovely that you were able to come along and share with the session. Now, I do have one last question for everybody, and this is looking sort of into the future, and you've all got a magic wand. What would you change about the society that we live in? Now, everyone knew this question was coming. So, who wants to go first?
I guess I have the microphone. I think I was talking about it earlier today, and I'm learning how to drive, hand controls. So I was driving normally before, but now I'm learning how to drive with hand controls. So I'm taking a lot of taxis this year, and a lot of different drivers, and they all have questions. They all want to know, what's wrong with me? What is it? Do you have an MS? Did you have a car accident? What's wrong? And I'm just sick of it.
Yeah.
Really, having to explain myself to people all the time. So I guess what I want is people to be more aware and more conscious about people with disabilities. So Tamara actually does what I think we should be doing, which is run disability awareness training, disability awareness training in schools to prime young children. So it normalises disability. So people become comfortable with disability. So when they see it, they don't freak out and have a million questions. So we need to raise more awareness. Yeah. That's what I want.
Thank you. Shirley?
Ditto, but I'd like to add that make things more accessible for people is really, which Telly alluded.
I'm sure Telly would have that one too.
Yeah, Telly alluded to that before anyway. But it's. I understand, and I think I said it before. Old buildings, yes, I understand that. But even new buildings, the ramp, you have to walk a mile to get up the ramp. It's so much easier and quicker to get up the steps. Disabled parking. They're fixing the roads everywhere. What about the footpaths? Has anyone tried to negotiate a scooter? Well, I'm just saying, a scooter, a walker, crutches on a footpath. I actually walk on the street because the street's much safer. My husband thinks I'm going to get killed. Don't open the... But I said, but it's safer to walk on the street than it is on the footpath. So, you know, these are challenges, and I'm walking around with, and as Telly and I know that she does, we walk around with our eyes glued to the ground because we're scared that we're going to fall.
Yeah.
So, and then who are we going to sue and who's going to look after us? So, you know, it creates another can of worms.
Okay.
Anyway, I just wanted to thank the Holocaust Centre and Jewish Care for putting this on today. I was a bit taken aback about the whole program, and I'm just proud to be here amongst such wonderful panellists to talk about our journeys in life and how far we've come and what we've achieved. And I, you know, take my hat off to my fellow panellists. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think if I could choose one thing to change, it's society's perception on and opinions of people living with a disability. More job opportunities should become available for people with a disability. No judging people who have disabilities. Eliminate the people that discriminate against people that have a disability. And in my opinion, I think disability is a couple of letters too long.
Okay.
We're able, just in a different way. We're not disabled. And just to break down the stigma that, you know, that disabled people have. We're not disabled, we just do things in a little bit of a different way.
Thanks,
So,
Tamara.
yeah.
Uri?
I would like to say that give that person with a disability the opportunity he or she could do, if not, well, let them keep trying until they set their goal, to get up to their goal they wish to have. Thank you.
Yeah, I pretty much echo everyone's sentiments. I think for me, when I talk openly about mental illness, the first reaction I always get is, "You're so brave." And I'd like to see it be so commonplace that it's not actually considered brave, because you'd never tell someone with high blood pressure that they're brave for saying they have high blood pressure. So I think that, you know, when we don't have that clear-cut distinguishment between the organic illness and mental illness, we'll know that we've equalised it. And I, as well, and we've all said this, but really just to emphasise the power of the label. Like, I don't wake up and think I have bipolar disorder. It's just, and I've been well for so many years, I just manage my life. And so many of my friends have less insight than me, less empathy with other people, just have their, I won't swear, but have their stuff less sorted than I do. Exactly, and they don't have labels. And I can't believe that as soon as I mention the label, suddenly the perception changes. And there are people that knew me for years that didn't know. And when I told them, the really good friends, it didn't change a thing because they just knew me as me. And it's so cliche, but none of us are the disability or the... Like, there are things that I can do that people in this audience can't do. You know, I've got a brain that's very different to most people's, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. So when people look at me and think, "Oh, you know, you've got a mental illness," and I think, well, I'm actually doing really well. I'm quite happy, thanks. But that's their judgment. Do you know what I mean? So I want to see that change. If we don't launch into altering our perception just because we're not seen as normal, when no one really is normal anyway, then that's kind of the world I want to live in. Yeah.
I think everyone agree it's been a wonderful conversation. We've had a fantastic panel who have really made, you know, us all think a little bit and thrown out some questions and challenges, but all, you know, also talked about how, you know, wonderful and positive all of you in terms of your lives and the opportunities that you have. Now, I'm going to ask Ellie Brooks from the Holocaust Centre just to come to close and thank everybody. So, Ellie.
Thank you, everyone. I'm Ellie Brooks. I'm on the board of the Holocaust Centre. I'm president of the Friends of the Holocaust Centre. And thank you for being here today, and how important it is for us to hear this wonderful forum. The panel, I heard what you said about being brave, but I think it is a courageous act on your behalf to advocate. And without your advocacy, we're ignorant. And so I hear that you're tired and you hate the questions, but if you're not going to answer the questions, how are we going to learn? And so I really thank you, each one of you, for being here. Shirley, Tamara, Duv, Telly, Yuri. I admire you so much, and I admire your courage in educating us. So thank you very much on behalf of everyone here for your contribution today. We've just got a small token of appreciation from the Centre for your being here. So I'd just like to give you each one. Thanks. Yeah, thank you. I also have the pleasure of thanking the two Michaels, certainly not Michael Squares. Michael Dembinski, President of Jewish Care, thank you so much for being here, for your wisdom and your chairing of the meeting. And we're very familiar with your presence, and we welcome you, and thank you so much for your contribution. To Dr. Michael Robertson, where are you? Oh, it's caught a plane and gone back. Well, I'd just like to publicly thank him, because this is the second weekend he's come down of his own volition to educate us about the exhibition and give us his words of wisdom. He's just a walking encyclopedia on this matter. So we'll have a gift for him, we'll pass that on. And the organisational representatives, thank you, Dean Cohen from Flying Fox, Shari Cohen from Maccabi, All Abilities, Laura Malabrowski, Jewish Care Practice Leader, Vicky Factor, thank you, President of Access, as you heard. Just also thank you to Marilyn Craner from Jewish Care for being here and your contribution as well. Thank you for giving a voice to those in the community who live with the challenges, so we can hear from you. We also have two more public programs I've been asked to tell you about in the next 2 Sundays. There's never a dull moment here and there's things going on, but this exhibition has enabled us to have wonderful programs around this very important topic. There's a film next week, Defiant Lives, with a local director and a Q&A session on disability activism, and so that's held here at the centre. And the following Sunday there's a workshop put together with Professor Paul Komisarov and Professor Leon Pitterman, and there'll be a panel discussion on that. So on behalf of the Jewish Holocaust Centre and Jewish Care, thank you very much for being here, and I look forward to seeing you all at other sessions and other times. Thank you.